Hello everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining our webinar, How to Moderate Remote User Studies. I'm Ryan from Userlytics, the premier user testing platform to help you scale your research affordably. Today, I'm very excited to have special guests Tan Nguyen and John Sag from Userlytics on our webinar. Both Tan and John are senior UX researchers on our team, creating research studies, analyzing results, and delivering insightful reports to many of our clients. Today, they'll be giving you great tips on how you can moderate remote studies successfully and talking about some of the differences of moderating in person versus remote. As an added bonus to being with us here today, those who stay all the way to the end of the webinar will receive an awesome gift to help you with some of your upcoming remote studies. So stay all the way to the end to make sure you don't miss out. Just before we get going, I do have some quick technical stuff for you. First off, start putting your questions in the question section now. I'll see them, I'll keep track of them, and I'll get them to Tan and John during the Q&A portion of the webinar. I might sprinkle in a few in the middle of the webinar, but most will be saved for the end. But the sooner you do get those questions in, the more likely we will have to answer them in the webinar. Also in that chat section, you'll see I'm about to place a couple links to Zoom support pages. If you're having any problems with the audio or video or general issues whatsoever, just click on those links and follow the instructions there. If you do need additional support, I'll work with you in the chat section as well. And I'll put those in just a second. But with all that wrapped up, John, how are you doing today?
Thanks so much, Ryan. I'm doing great. I hope everyone's doing well. I know it's kind of a time of unease and unrest in our world, and I hope this is a bit of a respite for everybody. We're happy to have all of you here, and even though it seems at times that parts of the world get thrown into chaos or put on pause, we're still doing user research. It's still really important to make our products and the things that we work on and our sites much better for our users, because they are still going to be out there using them no matter what's going on in the world. So today we're going to discuss some tips, tricks, best practices, setup of remote moderated studies. And we're going to go over, what is the difference between a moderated study and typical unmoderated studies, and, what is research moderation in general, right? So moderated sessions are usually one-on-one sessions, similar to a conversation or an informal interview. It's a chance for you to really understand the user's motivations, their behaviors, their thought patterns, emotions, how they think of the world, and through what lens they are examining your site or your app or your service or your offerings or whatever. The point of moderation, the point of doing studies and moderated studies in particular, is to understand the user's mental model and really uncover any issues, pain points, problems, stumbling blocks along the way for the product or site that you're working on. And moderated studies in particular are very powerful in that they can uncover things that you haven't really thought of yet. That's really the power of the moderated studies, to expose the unknown in a way that may be more challenging to do in a traditional unmoderated study. So I want to first go through just some of the fundamental differences between in-person and remote moderated studies. I saw in the poll responses that a little more than half of you, 29 people, said that they have done in-person user testing sessions before, which is great. I think that's probably much harder than doing remote moderated studies, just because you have to be aware of your surroundings. There's a lot of pressure. You're meeting people face-to-face, but also trying to get them to focus on something that they're doing on a computer or a device. I've seen a lot of you doing in-depth interviews and in-person interviews, which is fantastic. Focus groups, that's great. And then maybe a quarter of you, maybe a few more, have never done any kind of moderation at all before. So that's great too. We'll get you kind of up to speed on what that means. And if you've done remote user testing sessions, that's fantastic too. This is a great building block on top of any experience you may have doing unmoderated work as well. So first, in-person moderated, that's the one that everyone said they have the most frequency with. Can be in a lab or a user's natural environment. Scheduling can be tough, right? The key benefits of that: a lot of face-to-face contact. You can see their body language. You can understand sort of the concepts of how they're using everything. If you may run into somebody who's predominantly, most of your users are left-handed, or they don't even look at a part of a screen you thought was really important. Really helpful to do in-person moderated. Obviously, some considerations is it can be costly, right? Setting up a lab or setting up a location, and travel, getting somebody to come to that location, can be difficult. So moderated in-person, remote moderated, so stuff over Zoom or our own platform or any other kind of platform, obviously much more flexible, much more scalable because you don't have to go anywhere. It's just a timing issue. Video conferencing, the challenge there might be that it can make sometimes reading a participant a little more difficult. I think that challenge is starting to be mitigated quite a bit by people getting more and more accustomed to using Zoom chats and video conferencing in general. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, this sort of technology was really, really new and people weren't as comfortable with it. Now, for most people in their jobs or day-to-day, they're on Teams calls, they're on WebEx calls, they're on Zoom calls all the time. So a lot of this stuff becomes now second nature, and it's not as much of a hindrance to getting a remote moderated study done as it might have been. The key benefits, obviously, very easy to perform, ease of scheduling. You know, we have people right now who are from all over the world taking part in this webinar, and they can all be here because it's virtual. They don't have to travel anywhere. They can just work around their schedule, which is fantastic. Obviously, more limited visual feedback versus in person, as I mentioned. Cameras have, there was years ago we didn't really have necessarily, you couldn't bank on the person that you're working with to definitely have a webcam. Now they're built into every computer. So some of these challenges, just technology has started to solve some of those things. And obviously remote unmoderated. So not having a moderator study, but just having a typical remote user study. Very scalable, easy to spin those up. Great way to gather large amounts of information. Do A/B testing or testing iterative changes. We do a lot in Userlytics of launching a particular study or a course of studies first as a moderated study, and then branching off unmoderated remote studies off of that. So if you want to get a baseline understanding or start to really dig deep into a particular experience with a moderated study, and then branch off and do additional unmoderated studies in areas where you have concern or you want to go a bit more in depth, those two things really complement each other very well. So easiest method of testing, the unmoderated, generate results very quickly. But of course, because there's no moderator, the tests are a bit less flexible. You can and should program in some flexibility into your platform. You can do certain kinds of logic that can account for the unknown or the unexpected, but it's not going to be necessarily as wide-ranging as a moderated study. It can get fairly in-depth with a particular area, but you won't be able to just dynamically respond to what's going on necessarily all the time. So let's go a little more in-depth into in-person moderated studies, right? So the advantage is you have much more control over what's going on around you, equipment. You know that they're going to have a working computer because it's a computer in your company or in your lab or what have you. You can get a lot of physical interaction, can involve hardware, physical objects. They can come and use a tablet because they don't have a tablet, but you're testing on a tablet, or a physical device that if you're building a product or some other kind of physical good, they can do that. They can work with those things. But obviously limited geographic reach. Usually people would have to travel fairly locally, can be expensive, right? And you also have the potential for bias in a corporate or lab setting. If you're bringing people into a lab, you're bringing people into your company to do some sort of testing, and they're a bit out of their natural element. They're not in the area where they might usually use your product or your site or your app. And obviously, right, global pandemic, another limitation, social distancing, wearing masks, those kinds of things are the challenges we have to deal with. So if you're going to run an in-person moderated study, best practices is greet your participants prior to the session and ensure they're comfortable and ready to go. You can offer them a bottle of water, ask if they need to use the restroom before they get started. Stay mindful of your own body language. You don't want to give away something, or you kind of want to keep your affect fairly close and simple and not too wild and crazy. Always ask questions without asking leading questions. You want to make sure when you're asking questions in any kind of study, but particularly in a moderated one, you don't want to ask the question in a way that's going to lead the participant or the user to a certain expected end. We want to be open. Everything should be very open-ended. if you're asking them, how would you find the contact page? Well, maybe we didn't expect you to go to a contact page. How would you, maybe a better way to ask that would be, how would you find a way to reach out to the team that, or the company? You know, you don't want to necessarily formulate your questions in a way that hints at the answer or brings them to a desired path. You want to see what path they're going to take. And I would keep things below an hour. Usually that's sort of the hour is sort of the golden rule for pretty much everything. Meetings typically, hopefully, don't go over an hour. These webinars typically don't go over an hour, and for the same reason, we keep moderated sessions to under an hour. So for remote moderated studies, when you're actually going remote, obviously less bias from any kind of body language lab or corporate setting. The person that you're working with, the user, is going to be in their own environment. Maybe that environment that they're in is not the one they may be using, right? Maybe they're out of their office, or maybe their office has migrated to their home, but at least they're not in an uncomfortable space. Hopefully they're in a very comfortable space wherever they're working. There's not as many limitations, right? In the early morning, I could have a remote moderated session with someone in India, or someone, if it's really early in the morning, maybe someone in Australia. Whereas that would not be possible under normal circumstances unless they were to be flown in here or me fly out to them. Obviously, it costs a lot less. And it's much quicker and easier to set up the test and to recruit people because they can respond in real time to your requests for moderation. You can, in a typical in-person moderation, you're talking maybe lead time of days or weeks to schedule people to come in. Whereas with remote moderation, your lead time may be as short as a few minutes, maybe a few hours, where you're going to start to get people to respond. So obviously with the challenges side of things, a little bit less control over the environment. We're probably all intimately aware of some of those challenges now that we're all working remotely, or many of us are working remotely. And thank you to those essential workers who may be on the call who don't get the opportunity to necessarily work remotely all the time and have to go into the office or into a facility. We do appreciate all the work that you guys do as well. But there's distractions and noise no matter where you are, and those are things you have to kind of overcome. There are some more limited test taking capabilities, right? So we can't put anything on the individual or use really anything beyond a camera to record what they're doing. And typically we limit these things to software. Of course, you could, if it's a physical product, you could schedule an interview or a session with them over Zoom and then send them the physical product to start using and say, hey, don't open it before you join the call or something like that. That's always a possibility. There's ways around these challenges for sure. So quickly introduce the participants to the platform prior to the session, just so they understand what they're going to be using. Please go to your computer, please use the Chrome browser. Here's the login page. Here's the credentials to get logged in. I always suggest when you're running a remote moderated study, usually the software records as well, but I like to run a local record if at all possible on my end. And there's ways you can do that with screen recording software on your computer, especially if you're using the UserLeaks platform or any other platform that does it via web browser. Then you can use another recording application if you want to, if you just want to keep it backup. Our platform, most platforms, Zoom included, are obviously very robust, and the possibility of failure is extremely low. But it's always good to have a backup if you just want to make sure, for your own note-taking purposes or what have you. Consider the person that you're moderating, consider their network. Maybe they are at home and they have not a very robust internet connection. Or maybe they work still in a corporate office and they may be using VPN or some sort of security standard in place. Check with them ahead of time to make sure they can access your site, or they can use Zoom or whatever, or our platform, whatever platform they're going to be using, to make sure that you won't have any technical issues when you get there. And again, less than 60 minutes is preferred. So I wanted to give you guys an example of a remote moderated study that I did. This is Tan and I, and we just went through a common function that we've done many times here at UserLeaks, where we go over the shopping experience to understand how someone might use Amazon, for example. I didn't give any direction to Tan before we did this, so I just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to see what a remote moderation session looks like, and sort of the questions that you get to choose to ask, and some of the areas that you get to explore as you're doing that. So I'll start that now. before we get started, thank you so much for joining me today. This whole process, not about testing you. We're just trying to understand better how users use different websites. And if you wouldn't mind starting out, this whole process is very much about speaking out loud and kind of giving your feedback, so we can understand how you think and how you act when you get on different sites. So would you mind reading that task box text there aloud?
Yeah, okay. So as you explore and perform the tasks, please speak aloud and explain what you're doing. If you feel stuck or unsure about how to proceed, it's okay to say so. For this test, we'd like you to shop for iced tea, as you normally would. Please begin by visiting this link. I'm looking for something that's going to taste good, so I'm going to have to rely on the customer reviews and ratings for a product like this. So yeah, I see the bestseller. That's a 12 pack, 16 bucks. That's a 6 pack, 10 bucks. I've heard of this brand before. I think it's pretty reputable. I think a lot of people like it. Haven't really come across this. I might have seen it at the grocery store, but I'm not sure. But since this is a bestseller, I'm just going to go ahead and check this one out. And
Great.
Like I said, yeah, I'm looking for something that tastes good, so I'm just going to scroll down. I don't really care about all of this stuff. I'm going to scroll down and check the reviews. So great tea, very high price. This person was concerned about the price. For me, that's not a big deal. So
Okay.
I'm kind of disregard that review.
So as you're going through the pages, what's kind of catching your eye besides the reviews? I know we're going through the reviews quite a bit, but
Yeah. So obviously the first thing is this right here, and the Amazon's Choice badge is nice. I'm noticing that Amazon, like if I hover over the badge, that it's telling me how this badge is being used, or how products are being identified with these badges, which is something new. I never noticed this before. That's cool. Amazon's Choice recommends highly rated and well-priced products. But at the same time, that doesn't really tell me anything. I don't know if it's something that they can pay for, or it's based on an algorithm, and if it is, and I don't know what factors,
Right.
So, I mean, it's nice to have. It's definitely better than nothing, but Amazon's Choice to me isn't that much of a deal breaker compared to bestseller.
So we've done a lot of, I'll go back for a second. We've done a lot of studies on Amazon, and I think every single time we have a moderated study on Amazon, someone discovers something new they didn't expect. We've certainly done a lot of studies around this platform in particular because there's so much attention on it, and we've always been able to draw some really interesting insights on how people shop on the site. It's the most used site, obviously. I think one of the most used sites for online shopping across the world. So there's a lot to be learned from using it and how users interact with it. So you can see from the example that we're both on camera, we could both see each other, and I'm able to ask him questions as we go, and I'm taking notes as he's looking over things. Obviously, I have the recording, so I can go back and pull out interesting highlights or just note things that he said that might be of interest to the client, if there was a client involved with this. But the dynamic nature of the remote moderated study really allows you to go in depth on something. So the example I left in the video was that he didn't realize when you hover over on Amazon's Choice that it tells you what Amazon's Choice means. I think that, I don't know if that was ever there. Personally, I've never hovered over it either. So I always assumed Amazon's Choice was some sort of maybe an editorial decision, or was based on some metrics around sales and so forth. So now that he's seen what it means, he doesn't know that he necessarily trusts it as much as he may have initially, or certainly not as much maybe as a bestseller, because as you mentioned in the study, bestseller is probably tied to sales metrics on how well that product is doing. And that's just one example of, the assumption may be amongst people who are putting their products out there at Amazon that an Amazon's Choice may have more weight or some sort of similar weighting to bestseller, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe bestsellers actually has more weight to consumers than not. And you can dive deep into those kinds of issues when they come up. Someone else may be more interested in the number of reviews something has gotten, or what percentage of 5-star reviews something has gotten, or maybe they use filters in a different way than other people do. The moderated session allows you to really dig deep into those specific issues. And then items when they arise, and start to ask the questions around those that maybe you didn't think to ask in your initial study. So now I wanted to go into sort of how to craft a good moderation guide. So when you are going to begin moderating a study, it's always good to lay out a guide document that all of your stakeholders are on board with. Everyone's good with the stated goal. It's really a guide to help you move through the research session. It can be step-by-step, or it can focus on just topics and questions, but it should be very flexible. It should be flexible enough, as I stated in the example, to steer the ship, to diverge, away for a moment to really investigate something that has come up during your study. It's very helpful to have a guide just to keep you on task, to make sure goals and everything are there. And we'll go over what to include. But there's different areas where guides might be called for in a different way, right? You could have a regular usability test where the guide is very task-based. You're going to list out all the tasks you're expecting the user to do during the study or during the course of the study, and some questions that you're going to have for them as they go. You're going to want to note different things that you're going to want to touch upon as they're going through this. Maybe you're studying a contact page, as I mentioned in an earlier example, and you want to make sure that you ask them, if they don't bring it up themselves, if they ask them or find out if they see a particular feature on the site that's been added. If they don't see it, you may want to bring their attention to it and see if it's workable. If it works, find out why they didn't see it. So that's what your guide is going to help you to do. If it's an interview style study, it can be very question focused, where you don't really have any tasks. You're just kind of allowing them very openly to just kind of flow through a particular site or app or what have you. Which puts a lot more emphasis on the questions that you want to get answered. This is a good opportunity to make sure that with all your stakeholders, you have all the questions in there that you want to get answered. And not necessarily the questions you're going to ask the user, but the questions you yourself or your stakeholders have and that you want to get some insights around. And the final could just be a discussion or a focus group. That can be very topic or question-led as well. And this is going to also be very open-ended, but maybe you have more than one participant, or you're going to have just an open discussion on a particular area, and you don't really have a site or something in mind that they're going to go to. An example of a discussion might be, hey, we don't want you to shop on Amazon. We want you to shop anywhere you want to shop for a particular item or a particular area that you care about or want to research. And it's very open-ended. You don't really have any tasks associated with that. You just have some questions or some areas you want to hit, and you're going to just gain as many insights as you can. And then later on, you may want to narrow the focus of that to an interview or to a usability test to understand it better. So some things to include in your moderated guide, your moderator guide. The goal of the study. Really important that everyone is on board who's involved. From the stakeholders, anybody who may be involved in making the questions or asking the questions or paying for the study in general, everyone on board with the goal at the same time. That's really important. Next is an introduction and a background. So make sure that you introduce yourself. You heard me do it in the example clip. Thank you for joining me. I always iterate, it's important that they know that we're not testing your ability to use the web. We're not looking for a way that, we can catch you in a weird way that you use their mouse or whatever it is. We just want to understand better what you're doing and give them a little background on what the study is about. You don't have to sell them on the entire thing. They obviously want to take part in it, and don't tell them anything they shouldn't know ahead of time, right? Don't give away the secrets of the study or what things you're going to be trying to catch them in terms of pain points. Let them know, hey, we're studying this thing. We want to learn more about how you use this site or this app. And, I may not be able to answer all your questions is one of the things I said, but we'll take them at the end. Keep the questions, not necessarily the ones you're going to ask participants, although you want to include those too, but any questions, as I mentioned, that you want to have answered. These are things that, I want to make sure they can see the question mark at the top in the menu, that's obvious what that does, or I want them. I want to see how they log into my app because we're using a QR code and it's a little dicey. You want to make sure that they understand what that QR code is for. Those are the kinds of questions you want to include in your guide. So you're making sure that you're going to get those answers to those questions somehow, some way, as you're going through the study. And of course, the tasks or questions you're going to ask the participant, always good to have those written down. It's easy to get tripped up as you're going through, or kind of get lost along the way as you're talking, and you want to get something, have some guideposts in your guide, in your document, that keep you focused and on point. And a thank you closing honorarium if you're going to give them any sort of compensation for their time. I never open with the honorarium, right? Say, hey, thanks for being here. We're going to give you a $25 gift card at the end. Why don't you tell me what you think? Make sure, I don't think that's necessarily expected, and certain circumstances they're going to be paid for their time anyway, so they already know that. But if you're running a study that is not necessarily compensated, but you still want to compensate them, just save that for the end. And obviously thank them for their time and their participation. And this is also not an opportunity that you can offer them an opportunity to have ask any questions, or offer any additional thoughts that they had that maybe didn't come up when they were going through the page or the app or what have you in the beginning. Gives them a little extra feedback time at the end that they can give you. And these are optional. You can keep them in your guide or not, but maybe a checklist of places that you want them to go, notes on time limits or checkpoints. Hey, we got to hit this, this page on the site, and 25 minutes in, so we have enough time at the end to get through the rest of it. And any notes on recruitment that you want to include, people that you want to speak to, demographics, those sorts of things can all be in your guide as well. And I want to share some tips with you guys. So number one, I would say, is make users feel comfortable. We're nervous when we talk to our users. We're nervous when we're planning out these sessions. Often, even if you've done this a lot, you're still a little nervous to talk to somebody you maybe have never talked to before. They're nervous too. They may have done this a lot. They may have never done this before. They don't know you personally. They may be a little hesitant or uncomfortable in some ways. They may be, like I said, a little nervous. So, say what you can to make them feel comfortable. That's why I put in the note to say, hey, we're not testing your ability. We really appreciate what you're doing. Just be very friendly and open. And as I'm doing now, find the right balance between talking too much and interjecting and maybe distracting them, or taking up too much of the time with your own talking and not talking enough. I think there is a really fine balance between those two things. You don't want to be super quiet and not say anything, and then the person is sitting there sometimes thinking, do I talk now? Is the person still there? And then the opposite would be, man, is this guy going to be quiet so I can say something about this site? So you want to find that balance, and that just takes time, I think. Some of you are probably naturally very open. If you're into UX at all, or you're into user research at all, I think you're probably already pretty comfortable talking to people. So that might come second nature to you, and you'll find that right balance. And if you've never moderated before, or even if you have, practice with people, colleagues. Do a dry run of your moderated session ahead of time. Spouses, kids that are older maybe are great test subjects to try on your moderated study, and have them sit with them and have them go through the site or the app or what have you, so you can kind of see what they're going to experience. And that's also a great way to find, an area that you didn't think about that may trip them up. Like, you have all your study planned, and then you realize that the login screen is really, really tiny. And you didn't even think about that, but it's hard for people to see. So you could address some of those concerns right off the bat before you don't want to derail your study. And obviously have a backup plan. Technical issues happen all the time. People have problem with their browser, their computer restarts, their webcam is blocked for some reason. Just have a plan in case something happens. Have a different, maybe a different way you can communicate with them. Grab their email address. It's okay if you need to reschedule them for a different time. Most people that take part in these sessions, they really do want to take part in them, and they really do want to help, and they're very understanding if things happen. Sometimes they just can't be helped. we've had people who just can't figure out their computer and it's not working right, and then this computer hates me, and that sometimes you just gotta, hey, we'll try it again. You can do a little help with them at that moment. You can try and, if you're technically adept, you can try and get their computer back on track and to help you out. But sometimes it's just you can't get over it. But have a backup plan in case that does happen. So now I'm going to bring in Ryan again, and he's going to show you an example of how you can launch a test on our platform on UserList, because we have a fantastic moderation platform. And I will turn it over to him.
Thank you, John. Go ahead and, if you can stop sharing your screen for 1 second so I can share mine.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And can you see this, John? My screen?
I can.
Wonderful. Hope all you guys can too. If someone's having trouble seeing my screen, just let us know in the chat and we'll work with you. So this is our platform. As some of y'all may have seen this before, others may be new. This is our menu item on the left-hand side, and these are the studies we have. We can see this top few here all in draft, next one in running and closed. We can see here this one, for example, is a previous moderated study. Instead of talking about some of our features, which are really cutting edge and help you analyze results a lot quicker, like highlight reels, annotated clips that you can share very easily, the notes you can take, our metrics section, which is going to have all of the answers, I'm just going to focus today on how to create a test and what that's going to be like. And when you go through and create a test, if you do an unmoderated study, as John mentioned at the beginning, we're just going to have 6 steps here along the top. However, as we'll be talking mostly about moderated, I'll just go ahead and click the live moderated button right here. You'll see a 7th step of schedule appears quite easily right there. And everything else is going to be the exact same. So you can come in and put the name of the test. You can say if you want it to be a website or a prototype test. You can have the user start on your prototype or website, or they can be shown a blank page and later get taken to your prototype or website. That way they're not primed when they start the study. Then the participant sourcing, you can either access our panel or provide your own participants. If you access our panel, all the same demographic filters are going to be here: country, state, gender, age, some other fun ones as well, like income and employment status. And if you do have anything more specific than that, we of course have a screener section, and you can add as many screener questions as you like. Just simply drag and drop the screener questions or choose from a selected list that we have here. And when you're coming through, you can easily define any of these questions and answers. And then from here, easily have a redirect to say, okay, this person's going to be qualified. This person's going to go to a follow-up question because I'm not sure yet. And you can define the screener as you like. More than that, even the pre-made questions we have are completely editable. You can delete options, add options, edit the text. So everything in here is completely freeform for how you want to go about it. Then just jumping back a step, going back to schedule, this is how our scheduling feature works. And you can just come over here and choose any times that you would be open. So here you go Friday at 3, let's say Thursday at 3, and just for fun of it, let's do a Sunday session as well. So the participant has a few choices to go through. When the participant matches your demographic filters and passes your screener and qualifies through your screener, they get taken here and they can choose a slot that would work for them. At the moment, you get an email notification, as do they, and everything can be done through email. You can just join through email very easily, and they would actually enter in the test right when you do, and you can go through and have the full session. The final step here is actually creating the test itself. And creating the test, as John said, you can be very free-form with this, you can be very open with this, or you can be very specific. For example, as he was talking about, if you want to have more of an interview kind of set situation, you can just have listen to the moderator as your only instruction. And then you as a moderator, you can have written notes there in front of you, or maybe another tab open or something that you want to share with the participant just verbally. That's definitely a possibility. If you do want to come over and make this a full usability study as well, with rating questions and write-in responses and system usability scale and any other question type you want to go ahead, by all means, you definitely can. You can build this test out however you want. Just as we saw in the screener section, you can be putting in any questions in any order to really make sure that you're going after the exact items you're looking to test. And one more important thing to talk about is we do have an unlimited number of redirects. So you can send users, let's say, to Google, and then before that, maybe your prototype, whatever that would be. And so that way you can be directing them automatically to the sites or apps, whether they're yours, your competitors, something that isn't launched yet, so that way you can be analyzing everything side by side, and that would be available for you as well. Finally, there's a little preview to make sure everything is working out well. Then you hit confirm and launch the test, and we'll start sourcing participants for you right then if you're looking for us to. Or if you're sourcing the participants, it'd be very easy because you just get a link and you pass that link to your users, and then they go through and sign up. So that's just a really quick way for how our moderated feature is set up. As you can see, that took just a couple of minutes to set up a moderated study. All of that is and moves really quick. So I'll pass this back over to John so he can continue on with this conversation.
Thanks, Ryan. Userlytics is a pretty full service organization. We can just provide you the platform, or we can help you every step of the way in doing a moderated study. We can help you identify the research questions and goals that you may have. We can help you prepare test assets, things like prototypes, websites, and apps. We can help you determine the appropriate research method, study scope, and tools that you're going to be using. We can also help you design a test script, write a guide, program those things into the platform, launch the tests, help you with recruitment and scheduling of participants, or analyzing the results and delivering the insights. And you can utilize Userlytics for any or all of these things. If you already know the research questions and goals and you just need help determining the right method and maybe recruiting but not analyzing, that's fine too. We can help you, tailor a solution that will work for you. And I think something else Ryan wanted to share.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're just about to head to the QA section of this webinar, so please start putting your questions in there if you haven't already. But just before we do get there, as you can see with the slide that's here, I'd like to pass you our little gift. After this webinar, everyone here will get premier access to our moderated beta if you don't have it already, as well as 2 free panel credits to launch your first moderated study completely free of charge, letting you put into practice what you just learned here, as what we've been showing you just now. This gift will provide you with a full 60-minute moderated session where we provide you with a broad-based participant, or you can even provide a participant yourself, as well as all of our advanced analysis tools that I mentioned, like highlight reels and metrics and all that stuff, to help you easily run your first remote study and extract as many valuable insights as possible. We understand that you might have some questions now about how to access this free gift, so we'll be providing you more information in a follow-up email in the coming days for how you can join our platform, how you can get your first study set up, how to source your first participant for free, how to sign up for a personalized walkthrough, if that's something you may want, and anything else you may need. If you do have any questions, then please feel free to reach out to our team at success@userlytics.com. I'll put that also in the chat section right now as just to make sure that everyone has this. So I'm setting it in there right now. And you should all see that. But with that, let's move over to the questions. We've had a few good questions come in, and once again, please start putting your questions in. The more you put in, the more we have to go with. The first question that came in is, and I'll ask this, just to get a new voice in here, I'll ask this right to Tan. So Tan, how can the moderator encourage the think out loud process without interrupting the tester?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, so I just want to start off by saying that you're going to, as a moderator, you're going to see a lot of different types of participants, right? You might have someone who's not very talkative. They're answering your questions with like short yes or no, or they're not speaking aloud as they're going through the tasks. Or you might have a tester who is very talkative and they might go off script and off scope. In which case your job as the moderator is kind of reel them back in to the test and ensure that they make it through all of the tasks and all the questions that you want answered. So when it comes to a tester that isn't currently thinking out loud, just feel free to ask them what they're thinking. So ask them to walk them through what they're doing or what they're thinking. If they click on something or interact with something, ask them why they did that, what they expected to see or expected to happen when they did that. So yeah, I think it's absolutely okay for the moderator to kind of interject and I guess interrupt the tester. But if they're not currently speaking their thoughts out loud, I think it's okay to just to be like, so walk me through what you're thinking or what you're doing.
And to add to that, it's okay to remind them in the beginning in the session and anywhere that you feel is appropriate, please speak out loud and let us know what you're thinking. Sometimes it's just that they feel a little shy or nervous about speaking out loud. So sometimes with certain people, the more you talk, the more they want to talk. You can also just have a little friendly banter in the beginning, ask them where they're from, if they had a good weekend, if it's a Monday or Tuesday, something like that. There's ways that you can definitely encourage them to talk more, and just repetition of, please speak aloud, please share your thoughts, and that's fine, because that will at least reinforce the idea. Sometimes they just forget. They're not used to talking out loud because they work, at home by themselves now, and they don't have anyone to talk to. So repetition is a good way to do that.
Fantastic. And the next question we have here, thank you both for answering that, by the way. The next question we have here is, how do you see working from home and COVID fears affecting in-person workshops, design sprints, etc.? I'll go ahead and let you start with this one, John.
Obviously, I think we're eventually going to get back to a point where we can have these things again. Right now, it's a bit more challenging, obviously. We're seeing a lot of adoption of remote and virtual webinars and events and all those kinds of things. And as I said, people are becoming a lot more comfortable with that. So if you were to tell me, I would believe you if you were to tell me, hey, a year from now, a lot more moderated sessions are moving to remote because it's easier, and it's, you still get a lot of great insights without the need to be physically in the same place as the person, because everyone's becoming much more comfortable with doing remote work in general. Design sprints is another great thing. In a lot of the companies that we talk to, most of their teams, even if they're co-located, they're still meeting remotely because they're at their desks. Teams are on different floors, or the teams are very diverse and cross-function, so they work with a variety of other teams to get work done. So meeting on Microsoft Teams or Slack is just natural and part of the process now, in which case that's totally fine. I would have a hard time saying to anyone that there's definitely a place for the in-person stuff for sure. It's a great way to gather feedback, especially in the right context, like if you're at an event or conference. But I think we're going to have a lot less resistance and a lot more adoption of remote solutions because of, this is kind of taught, I think, every business that you don't have to be afraid of these virtual remote type solutions, that they're actually very enabling and helpful, especially when you think about the scalability and the geographic reach that you gain from using tools like this.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Do you have anything to follow up with, Tim?
I just want to say I completely agree with John. At the moment, speaking with some of my friends and colleagues in the industry, I know that the companies that they're working with and their clients have switched entirely to remote, at least for the time being. But with that said, I think once people, start using remote methodology more often, they're going to start to see the benefits of remote. And, if and when this pandemic situation resolves itself, I could very well see, the percentage of remote versus in-person shifting more towards remote, just because, the people are realizing that they can do it and they can use it to address their needs.
Awesome. Thank you both. This next question is more for our product, so I'll go ahead and answer this one. The question is Zoom the software you use for all remote moderated synchronous sessions? Currently, no. Zoom is a great platform for running moderated sessions. However, we built our platform with the help of a few different frameworks out there that have already been developed, and that really gives us a lot of flexibility to integrate really into our platform, and also gives us the ability to run these studies in browser. So the user that we're talking to, or the moderator's talking to, doesn't actually have to download any program. They can run this in Chrome or Firefox or a few different browsers, and everything could be done or recorded there. And then because it's integrated so well to our platform, it immediately uploads to our platform, and you immediately get a bunch of metrics like time on task, success failure ratios, answers to any questions like single choice, open-ended, anything of that nature. And that's all easily shared and stored for you. All that, like I said, integrates really well. So that's kind of what we're doing now. And thank you for that question. The next question I have here is from Sean. And I'll go ahead and direct this one to you, Tan, first. How many users would you suggest running through a moderated study? We typically run about 10 through an unmoderated study.
Yeah, great question. I think it depends on what type of study you're running. If you're doing something more generative, like in-depth interviews, something like that, typically you'd want a little bit more than 10. Um, but if you're doing a usability test, then 10 is a perfect number for me. Everyone knows that the kind of golden number is like around 7 participants for a usability test. But if you have to also consider some of the obstacles and technical issues that you might run into doing a remote moderated study or just a moderated study in general. So over recruiting a little bit is always nice and helpful. And yeah, I think 10 for an unmoderated usability test is a perfect number.
And John, anything else?
I would agree that 10 is definitely a good number. I don't. Jared Spool, who does the UX Center, head of Center, and does a lot of UX work and kind of the forefather of a lot of user research thinking, sees that really it's a project dependent answer to the question. So if you have a very simple study that you want to run, you could probably do very well with a more limited number of moderated testers. If you have something that's you would gain value from talking to a lot more people, if your audience is very diverse and you want to recruit a few participants from different demographics that you consider that are your clients or that are your customers, then I think more is valuable. I don't think you can ever really go wrong with talking to more people because you're just understanding the way users think and the way they use your product better with every person that you talk to. A lot of the studies that we've done to success have used probably about 10, sometimes more. Sometimes we've done as many as 30 or 40. So I think there's probably a minimum. I wouldn't, certainly I would do more than 5 if you can facilitate that. 10 is great. More than that is great too. It just kind of depends on the scope of your study and what you're looking to uncover.
Mm-hmm. And to follow up with both what Tan and John said, some of our clients are combining moderated and unmoderated.
Right.
Usually
exactly.
Easily start with a few moderated sessions, 4 or 5 moderated sessions, get a good feel, and then turn unmoderated, as that'll really give you scale. So I don't have to even have an or situation there.
Right, we see that a lot. That's a great point. I should have brought that up. We do see a lot of, as I mentioned, using the moderated session to branch off into areas that you want to study unmoderated, and that really gives you the best of both worlds in terms of using going through a breadth of things with maybe 5, 10, 15 people, and then identifying areas where you really want to study further with a larger group of people, but unmoderated, and you're going to turn that over to an unmoderated test.
Fantastic. Thank you. This next question is from Onit, and I'll go ahead and direct this one to you first, John. It says, and I'll hit this button. If during the test I want to probe deeper into a behavior, do we do it there and then in the exact moment I observed it, or should we leave it to the end, kind of like a Q&A that we're doing now?
I tend to do it right there and then, especially if your task would allow the interruption. If it's going to be something where they're in the middle of a flow, say like a registration process, or something that they have to complete a number of steps before it's finished, you may want to wait till the end of that. If it's something like they're just kind of browsing a site, like I was doing the example with Tan earlier, and you want to deep dive, I think to do it right then and there, it's fresh in their mind about why they made a certain decision or went down a certain path, and you can explore that. Just keep your time in mind that the tendency may be to get really excited about uncovering something that you didn't expect, or hearing a great sound clip you want to share with a stakeholder, and then maybe you spend way too much time on it and lose sight of time, and then now you're almost at 50 minutes, and I got more to go through. So just if you do that, just be conscious of the time.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And one thing I want to add is, at your job as the moderator is to really understand the tasks that you're asking the participants to go through. And if you feel that you want to dive a little bit deeper into something that they did, yeah, it's great to do it right then and there because it's fresh in the participant's mind. But at the same time, you want to make sure that what you're asking them or the words that you're using isn't going to prime them for a subsequent task or anything like that.
That's a great
And
point. Yeah.
another thing I want to mention is moderation, like moderated tests. They're not often linear. They don't have to be linear. So you might design your test script to go through task A, B, C, D, but when you are with a real participant, a real user, their personal flow might be B, C, D, A, for example. And in that case, I think it's okay. You want to allow for the most natural behavior as possible, and just go with the flow. And as long as you're making sure that all your research questions are addressed.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you both.
exactly.
So there's a couple questions here about our product. I'll just touch upon them really briefly. One of them is, how does our moderated tool compare to Lookback? There are a lot of good platforms out there, and Lookback is a wonderful platform, just like Userlytics. The difference between us would be we have a large panel of participants we can source from, international pool that's growing quite rapidly, and we also have a lot of advanced features afterwards. So you can create the questions you want. You can also have those answers stored. Lookback is more of just almost like Zoom, and the fact that you can kind of talk to the user and maybe cut out some videos, but you won't have the ability to store answers and all that stuff. And also in Userlytics, we do have a really good way of clipping videos, bringing videos together, and sharing those videos with people who have Userlytics accounts or don't. And also we have audio transcriptions, some other features that help you really analyze the results faster. For example, success failure is just going to be displayed to you, and you can click on any failed session and go to that exact moment of the video, saving you a lot of time in the analysis process. And we had another question here. Will unmoderated studies be available to run in the browser without a download? That's a great question, and it's what we're moving towards. So that will likely be available here in the coming months, to where everything will have the no download ability. That way that you can do testing behind corporate firewalls very easily, and it eases the onboarding process for the users. And we're pretty much at the hour, but we do have a couple really good questions left. So I think we can stay an extra minute after, if that's okay with y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Where was it? Here was one of them. So what do you do if you find the users are just telling you what they think you want to hear, or if they divert to irrelevant matters? And John, I'll go ahead and let this start with you.
I mean, there are definitely going to be participants that will just kind of perform a little bit for you and want to tell you, like you said, what you want to hear, and maybe not be honest. And even in those circumstances, you can tell when the person is not like doing what they would probably normally be doing. That's always that goes back to the biasy question, and that's sort of a risk that we always run in these sort of studies. Most people are not like that. And you can just remind the person as you're going through the session, please be honest and show us exactly what you're going to do. And even if they say they're going to do something or they act a certain way, the old adage, I always mess it up, but the old adage goes somewhere like, what users think they do, what they say they do, and what they actually do are often three different things. And that's definitely true even in the moderated session. So they may think that they use this site all the time, but when they go through the steps, you realize that they're completely unfamiliar with it, that what you think might be obvious things they don't even see, or you ask them pointed questions about certain parts of the site, and they answer them incorrectly. You're going to experience that. And even that aspect of it, even if it's a little showmanship going on, it still provides an insight for you that you can use. If folks are thinking that they behave, or they say that they behave a different way than they actually do, then watching their behaviors and comparing them to what they're saying or what they're telling you that they would want to do provides really valuable insight. Hey, I always use the contact form. I love that contact form. And every site I go to, I use the chat. And then you go to their site, you go to the site that you want them to go to, and they ignore the chat, and they ignore the contact form, and they go right for the telephone number. So it's like, well, all right. So obviously, goes back to that old adage.
Yeah, and I just want to add, so sometimes we have participants that when you're asking them a question or asking them to perform a task or asking them about their thoughts, they say something along the lines of, yeah, this would be really confusing for my mother or someone who is not
Mm-hmm.
very good with technology, for example. And in that case, I think it's really important to remind the participant that, we're just looking for their personal response, like their perceptions of the system, not what they think other people might say. And when it comes to them diverting into irrelevant matters, for me, I just like to personally say, let them go on for a little bit. You don't want to interrupt them because you come off as rude, and you don't want them thinking that you're not interested in them in what they have to say. But I'll let them go on for a little bit, and if it looks like we're going to be short on time, I'll just ask them, hey, let's pause here for a second, and I'm just going to throw in a question to kind of divert them from their little tangent, and then just move on to the next task.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And I think we have time for one last question. And so there's one here. Do you typically recommend testing only people who fit the target audience? How do you approach recruitment? And I'll go ahead and start with you, Tan, first, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's always best to get like a representative sample of participants that are similar to the same sorts of users that are going to be using your platform or your system or your product. But that isn't to say that you should always be super specific with your recruitment criteria. Essentially, you want to think about how these demographics or how these criteria affect someone's experience using your product, and you want to tailor your recruitment to a broad enough audience that captures a wide range of users that would use your product, but at the same time you don't want to be too narrow where you're not getting a good representation of your user base.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Don't close yourself off to other perspectives. An example might be you may want to just talk all to current clients or current customers, but it might be valuable to get insight from people who have never heard of your product or heard of your service before.
And tied to that as well, some really narrow profiles might just be really hard to source. If you're doing CEOs at really large companies, but you're just testing the landing page to see if somebody knows how to log in or something like that, then that could be done by everyone. And just because your product might be geared for CEOs, if it's a study that everyone can go through and help you with, then you don't need to be spending the time, the headache, the money to look for those really narrow users.
Yeah, one thing I also wanted to add is when you're thinking about recruiting, and maybe, for example, you're limited on budget or time or resources, and you might not be able to get as many people as you want to participate in your study, what you can do is make sure that you're recruiting for the extreme ends. So test with users who are, not comfortable using a platform like yours, and also test with users who use your platform on a daily basis, and that way you can get a good wide range of responses, and hopefully find enough of the usability issues.
All right, those are all really good. Thank you. Awesome. Let me collect myself. Thank you, Jonathan. Those are really good answers. Yeah, it's been a real pleasure to learn from you both here. And to you who did stay all the way to the end of the webinar with us, thank you for taking the time on your busy day to learn with us here. We hope that between the informative talk that John gave, the free remote moderated study provided by Userlytics, and the detailed Q&A we just had, you'll be leaving a session with a bunch of new capabilities to run your next remote moderated study well. As mentioned before, be on the lookout in the next few days for a follow-up email, which will have this recorded video in full, along with the slides in PDF form, and some instructions to set up your first remote moderated study. And also, more than that, we have about 10 questions that are unanswered here. So we'll collect these questions, and we'll be including these in the follow-up email as well, because, you guys had a lot of good questions today. Thank you for being so interactive. And after that, if you do have any questions regarding our platform, setup, pricing, or anything else, I've shared, and John has just reshared our link or our email, so you can reach out to us whenever you want. And just to say it out loud one more time, it is success@userlytics.com. So thank you all very much for attending and joining us with this webinar today, and hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.